Let's dive right into Dr. Kenneth Apaya Donkor Hiyaman's fascinating research on a pretty massive paradox in local governance, specifically looking at Ghana. Think about it. We constantly expect our local governments to build up our communities, right? But we rarely stop to ask what financial engine actually makes that possible. I mean, democracy hands power to the people, absolutely. But who actually pays for that power locally? It's a huge question. To figure it out, we're going to peel back the layers of global political history and see exactly how massive macro shifts end up dictating how your local roads actually get paved. Which brings us to Section 1, the rise of local governments. So picture the late 1980s. The fall of communism triggers this massive global shift away from centralized control. The idea spread like wildfire. By the early 90s, this democratic wave hits Ghana, and we see a rapid transition from grassroots groups, things like defense committees, straight into formally elected local governments. And that ultimately birthed the autonomous, decentralized local entities that we know today. Moving on to Section 2, money equals local control. Look, it really boils down to a pretty brutal reality. Money equals control. Political freedom, it's basically a facade without financial autonomy. Seriously, if a local mayor or a town council constantly has to go begging the central government to, fund a clinic or fix a bridge, well, then the central government still holds the true power. Because of that, true administrative autonomy demands a financial base that is entirely distinct from central transfers. A local government absolutely must have its own wallet, and that wallet has to be filled by entirely independent sources of income. Think of it like a strict, unbreakable blueprint for governance. Step 1, secure own source income. Why? Because that income is what guarantees genuine political autonomy in Step 2. And Step 3, that autonomy is what actually dictates the quality of services that residents and local businesses rely on to survive and thrive every single day. Okay, Section 3, the role of property rates. Now, in developing nations, the property rate emerges as the absolute cornerstone of local government revenue. It is the bedrock. Literally, without it, the financial independence of local governments would just completely collapse. But translating this grand economic idea into reality, well, that poses some major logistical questions. First and foremost, how is this crucial tax actually managed on the ground? How does a local authority go about collecting it efficiently and, just as importantly, transparently? And then we have to ask how the specific value of this tax is distributed. What's the actual basis here? We need to determine who pays what and figure out how to ensure the distribution of this tax burden is handled fairly across wildly different types of properties and neighborhoods. Let's look at Section 4, defining the property rate. Here is the formal definition. To translate some of the academic jargon from Dr. Donkor Hiyaman's research, like the term hereditament, which is often used in places like England to describe a property that can be inherited, it simply means a mandatory fee. It's a compulsory levy based on what a specific piece of real estate is assessed to be worth annually. Now, you might assume the bill always goes straight to the person whose name is on the deed, right? Actually, scratch that. It shifts entirely depending on the jurisdiction. In places like England, the levy is often placed on the occupier, the person actively living in or using the space. But in other systems, the tax falls squarely on the legal owner of the property, regardless of who's actually living there. And when it comes to determining that property's annual value, authorities generally rely on one of two methods. First, they can look at the open market, meaning exactly what the property would fetch from real-world negotiated rent values. Or they rely on an assessor's estimate. That's where a professional valuer uses established, standardized methods to calculate its worth. So as we wrap up this explainer of the source material, I want to leave you with this thought. We've seen that without independent revenue, local democracy is really just a nice concept on paper. Consider that the next time you see local infrastructure being built or a new community service rolling out in your neighborhood. If money truly equals control, how much of your community's autonomy and your local government's actual power to make a difference is being directly funded by the roof over your head?